On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, the perfect business financial class.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Shawn Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and welcome back from a one-week hiatus, your financial coach, George Curbelo. Welcome back, George.
Thank you, sir. I have to say, it was. I apologize, for not being here last week itself. But of course, life happens, and we gotta manage it as we can.
That's okay. I was barely able to make it through on my own.
Such a professional.
It was rough, but I managed.
I love it.
I only had 300 and something episodes of being by myself. It wasn't that hard to go back into the routine.
Fine, I get it. It's all right. We get it. You're amazing.
But no, welcome back.
Thank you, brother.
I like having you back.
I appreciate it.
One thing that we thought about today's episode that would be cool, back in episode 330, we talked about the personal finance education bill that was passed here in Florida that became effective in July of this year, July of 2022. And so episode 330 was you and I talking about if Governor DeSantis or the Florida governor or the Florida school board contacted us and said, hey, Florida law says we have to have this personal financial education class in order for seniors to graduate from high school, what kinds of things would you and I put into that personal financial education class? That was episode 330. And as we were talking about it, we thought, you know what? Why does this just have to apply to people, to individuals? Right. Why can't we apply it to businesses? Now, the Florida law only applies to individuals.
Of course.
But if the governor called us up one
he
day,
will. He will call us up. Maybe we already fixed the personal finance class.
Exactly.
So let's he's going to call us again and say, hey, let's expand and fix some more.
He's going to call us back and say you did such a good job developing that personal financial course. We want you to develop the perfect business financial course. So that's what today's episode is all about. Now, before we get there, I do want to mention one of our two sponsors, Sam Cohen, the owner of Attorneys First Insurance. Been with us forever, been a loyal follower, supporter, listener, financial backer of the show, so we really, really do appreciate that. Sam and Attorneys First Insurance write errors and omissions coverage or malpractice coverage for attorneys and title companies all over the country. So if you are an attorney or you own a title company and you're worried about your malpractice coverage, contact Sam at attorneysfirst.com, which is also the website, attorneysfirst.com. He can cover people even if they've had prior claims against them or if they're starting up their own title company or law firm, he can help them get coverage. So that would be a great way to support us, would be to support Sam. Back to, however, the perfect business financial class. So again, if you want to listen to the perfect personal financial class, go back and listen to episode 330, which was, this is episode 346. It was 16 weeks ago.
Holy, are we that? Wow, we've been doing this for a while now. That's a good thing. All right, yeah. I'll take it. The fact that I'm still here, people, that's a good thing. Good.
Although it was tempting getting back into the habit of doing it by myself last week.
All right. Let's ignore that feeling again. Let's go.
So, the perfect business financial class. What would be one thing that you would put into that class?
So again, we could do lame, right, and say you have to have a but again, monitoring spending. So a budget plan each month is still important. So I'm gonna play on that. We get that. The first thing is, please separate business from personal funds. That seems to be so important. When we start our small business, it's always kind of like, it's all money, right? We make money and it's just all in a certain pot. It's all right there. But what I've noticed itself is we learn that it's very important to be able to separate your personal from your business. The business obviously has to pay you, has to pay the expenditures to run the business, all of those kind of things itself. So you have a budget for your business, but I think there's a tax problem if you don't separate them. The IRS seems to know, like, hey, if there's no separation, it all becomes fair game when it comes to taxes. So I think that's one good reason to keep Uncle Sam out of the money pot.
Yeah, what I said, something along those same lines. So in terms of budgeting, I agree with you. Although what I wrote down for budgeting, instead of writing budgeting, I wrote, to learn and to understand the financial statements of the company. Understand your balance sheet, understand your profit and loss, understand your cash flow, understand that if there's profit showing at the end of the year, that's not necessarily money in your pocket, because there are other things that impact profit and loss and cash flow and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I had your financial statements in terms of a budget. The other thing I had...
Spending plan. Be a little bit more professional. The spending plan. But it's the same thing, guys.
Yeah.
Budget, spending plan, equal sign.
The other thing I had was Profit First. And so I interviewed Mike Michalowicz on the show, who wrote Profit First. And so that would be a great book if you wanted to read Profit First, if you haven't yet read it. If you have, go back and read it again. But the concept of Profit First is, a lot of business owners say revenue minus expenses equals my profit.
Right.
But what Profit First says is, no, revenue minus what profit do you want to pull from the company equals the money you have left over to fund your expenses. And he's a big proponent of what used to be the old envelope system. So for every dollar that comes in, a certain percentage goes into the tax fund, a certain percentage goes into the profit fund, a certain percentage goes into the asset fund, the expense fund, the fixed expenses, the variable expenses, all those kinds of things. And so he's a big fan. Mike Michalowicz, and Profit First is a proponent of separating each dollar into the different types of funds that you need to have in order to run the business. Now, there's another interesting angle I didn't write down, separating business and personal funds, but I love the idea because there's also a legal issue there.
Yep.
A lot of people come to me and say, form an LLC because I want to protect myself from liability. If the LLC gets sued, I don't want them to come after me personally. Well, if you treat your business like your personal checkbook, you have now opened yourself up to piercing the veil type liability. In other words, the creditors can come in and say there's effectively no difference between Shawn, the individual, and Yesner Law. And so if Yesner Law screws something up, we're going to go after Shawn, the individual. If Shawn gets into a car accident on a random weekend, we're going to go after Yesner Law, because there is effectively no difference between the two. And watch this. That's what our guest a couple of weeks ago, Jason Sampson, was here to talk about. So if you want to...
Mr. Asset Protection.
If you want other tips on asset protection, episode 344, 2 episodes ago, was Jason Sampson on asset protection. So, yeah, that's what I had, the balance sheet, Profit First, and I love the idea of separating business and personal funds. What else do you have?
So again, you mentioned cash flow. For me, cash flow strategy is important from that perspective. I look at it too, though, is so we have a lot of business owners, as much as we like to say, I'm going to sell the business, sell the services, we're going to have great months every month. There's always a season in regards to how your business runs. And knowing that allows you to make the necessary adjustments to, how you make money, what you're saving for, and how to run that business itself. So a lot of folks kind of like, I'll just, we'll keep making money until we make money. But real estate, as much as we'd like to say we'll sell 5 houses a month, you'll have one of those months. But what if you don't? There's got to be a strategy in regards to how that you're doing, how you're bringing in the money itself, if it's inventory or any of that kind of stuff. But making sure you understand, like, hey, when there's good months, what are you doing with that extra cash flow? And again, the extra cash that's coming in. And of course, what are you doing when there's not so good months? From that perspective.
And trying to anticipate when those months will and won't happen. I mean, I've said before, November and December are relatively slower for me because people don't want to think about foreclosures and bankruptcies and debt. They want to incur debt to buy all the Christmas presents.
'Tis the season.
They don't want to worry about when can we pay it off. They want to worry about incurring it.
That's January's problem. What are you talking about, brother?
Exactly. So that's a big deal for me. The first thing that I had on my list was, and maybe it's because I'm coming at it from the debt angle as well,
of course,
is to understand the difference between the different documents that you're going to be signing as the business owner. You've got notes, which are the promises for the banks or the credit card companies or whoever to lend you the money. You've got security agreements. So if you buy your building and you finance the purchase of your building, there's going to be a mortgage. If you buy a truck or another piece of equipment for the business, there's going to be a security agreement. If you have a lease, the lease probably ties your assets or your receivables or your inventory to any default under the lease agreement. If you're a brand new business owner starting out, so when I signed the lease here on my office location, I had to sign a personal guarantee. When I had to get an unsecured bank loan in the name of the law firm, I had to sign a personal guarantee. And basically that's the bank saying, if the business doesn't pay it back, Shawn individually is going to have to pay it back. So understanding all those different documents and contracts, and you know what, that is another type of business that I do, and I know other attorneys that are involved in that area of law as well. So if you're a new business owner starting up and you know, I need someone to help me review my lease, I need someone to help me review these loan documents, these vendor agreements, this, that, the other, let me know. If I can't help you out, I'm sure I can find an attorney that can. But that was my first point, is understanding all the different types of contracts and agreements that you're going to have to sign as a business owner.
Absolutely. That's a good point. As much as I'd like to say, oh, that's a great idea, it's probably the most boring piece of it in the beginning, but probably one of the most important when it comes to that. Again, opening the right accounts, you know, all of the LLC you mentioned before, all of that is like, oh, sorry, I woke up again. What's that? What's the, why is it important again?
It's interesting to me, but maybe it's because I'm in that life every day.
That's what it is, brother. But I hear you there. I do like that. Okay, I'll throw you another one itself for me is occurring debt, right? So we talked about, we're going there, but I'd like to say don't be afraid of loans.
Right.
You know, there is, as much as we like to say we're going to come into a business with all the money in the world, right, and be able to start that business itself, you're going to probably need to borrow in order to gain the capital that's necessary, get the cash flow boost that's needed. But knowing the difference between how you manage those loans, that debt itself, again, short-term liabilities, long-term liabilities, this is where, again, a good accountant would play into that process. And there's a difference in opinion. I probably, oh my goodness, debt against the business. Again, I'm not saying it's great. Don't go and do $1 million into the hole. But not being afraid to use loans to build the cash flow that's necessary to be able to grow the business, invest in the business, invest in yourself in regards to making it better. Again, buying inventory. A lot of us would love to start with great cash flow, but that's not always the case. Yeah. And you may need to borrow to do that.
I had that down. That was my third one.
Ooh, look at that.
The different kinds of lending.
Correct.
So, you talk about SBA is probably, the U.S. Small Business Administration is probably one of the more popular lending sources. But beware, I've seen some SBA loans that they make the business owner sign a personal guarantee, which is not uncommon. But the thing that really scares me about some SBA loans is they make the business owner take out a note and a second mortgage or third mortgage against their house.
Okay.
So if your business fails and the SBA has a third mortgage against your house, now the SBA can foreclose on your house. So again, review the documents up front and be really careful about that.
Yep.
But I also had things in there like, a PPP loan, which I had to take out in COVID, and it got forgiven, luckily. But what other lending sources are out there? EDL. No one really knew what an EDL loan was until COVID hit. But an EDL is an economic disaster loan, and so they've been available long before COVID, and they'll be available long since. We just had Hurricane Ian come through, so people in the Cape Coral, Sarasota, Manatee, those counties that were directly hit by Hurricane Ian, maybe there are EDL loans available for those types of things. The ones that I would definitely say to avoid, the ones that I've seen cause the biggest issue with my clients, or what typically causes people to come see me, those loans, you've heard of the companies like Cabbage and On Deck.
Yes.
Those short-term funding companies. Now, they may be necessary, but when you do those types of loans, be really, really careful about your cash flow, because typically the way those loans get repaid is they take a portion of your receivables on a weekly basis. So here you are thinking you're getting all this revenue from whatever source, and then it just, Cabbage or On Deck, or there's a million of these companies out there, just swipe it from the bank account on a weekly basis, and sometimes that is enough to crush the business, even though it got this short-term
The
loan.
idea of it. So again, short-term, long-term liability, definitely knowing the difference, but definitely stay. I get worried when it comes to like, I need the cash fast. Be careful with those. Yes, there's convenience, but I would say, go to your banks, your small business. Small business is also SBA. SBA is good. Credit unions. There's all sorts of options in regards to that, but definitely. I get worried with those fast cash. Click in 5 minutes, I'll get you, the loan you need. But I would be careful with that.
I've seen a ton of businesses that those types of loans force them into bankruptcy or force them in to come see me.
Got to be careful. Not that we don't want people to see you, but that's not one reason we want. I get it.
Exactly.
Nice guy. He's a nice guy, people. All right. So what you got? What else is on your list, my friend?
So one of the other boring things on my list, but it's just something that I've always done. Reconciling your bank accounts.
Documentation. Yes,
I
I guess
know.
a good strategy there. No, but you have to, right? Why? Why do you think that's the case?
So a couple different reasons. I think it's more prevalent for me personally. It seems to be more prevalent in my business than it does in my household, but just keeping track of how much money is coming in and going out. Now, the cash flow statement will help with that, but there are some payments that I've set up automatically that come out of the business operating account. And if I forget to enter those into QuickBooks says I've got, X amount of dollars when it's really a couple grand less because of all these automatic payments that are coming out. And then I potentially get in danger of bouncing a check. So reconciling the bank accounts on a regular basis. Plus, you want to reconcile your bank accounts, even personally.
Yeah.
You want to reconcile your bank accounts on a regular basis to find potential fraud. If there's a potential fraudulent transaction, I'm getting bombarded every day by emails and different schemes trying to steal my identity. I got one on Facebook the other day that said, you've been identified as one of these 20 businesses that have used our mark without permission.
Okay.
And you could tell it was spam. Click on this link to do da-da-da. Anytime you get an unsolicited email that says click on this link, there's a high probability that that's spam.
Right.
But if you were to click on it, somehow they got access to your bank accounts. If you're not reconciling your bank accounts on a monthly basis,
you're not going to notice.
You're not going to catch it.
Yep.
And if you get 3, 4, 5 months down the road, if you reconcile your bank accounts in January in anticipation of getting your tax returns done and you see something was swiped in March, it might be too late to try to get it back.
Yep. That's a good point itself, and good on a personal side. Hey, that's something we can add to the personal one as well. But I agree. Monitor your spending to be able to catch how you're doing also personally. Like where is the money going from a business perspective itself? Is it going to inventory? Is it going to training? Is it going to employees? Where you may need to cut? Because I look at it too. One of the other things too is kind of like, cut costs, increase, look for opportunities to increase revenue. But the one myth that I've learned recently itself, and maybe recently shouldn't say it out loud, but that's okay. Sales doesn't always equal profit. And if you're in that mode, if what you're selling is inventory, so service is different, from that perspective. You probably need to give up time so that you can't get back.
Right.
But when you're saying like I have products, and in order to get the inventory is needed to be able to cover the increased sales, that means you have to spend money to be able to get that inventory.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean, if I sell more, it's always guaranteed that I'm going to make more profit. There's always knowing that sweet spot in regards to doing that. So once again, if you don't look at your books, you don't look at the information itself, you'll never know, and you'll just be under that impression always that, I'll just sell more and I'll always make more. And it's like that's never... Again, that's not a guarantee, and then that's for every business. It's good to know that.
Well, and that could be another trigger in terms of maybe it's time to raise prices. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you've got a level of sales, but you don't have the level of profit you want, one way to cure that is to increase your prices.
Right.
If all else stays the same and your prices tick up a little bit, and people get it, and this is not just an inflation issue.
Right.
This is just an issue of I'm more experienced now, I'm more knowledgeable, I know how to do what I do better than I did last year, and there's a premium for that in some cases. And so I'm going to raise my prices a bit, and it might even be a way, raising prices might even make your company more profitable because there will be some people that will say, I don't like the increase in price, I'm gone.
Right.
But those tend to be, not in every case, but tend to be your more problemed children.
Right.
And so you're getting
Maybe
rid
not
of...
the ideal client, as you might. We'll say that. Maybe
Exactly.
that's the professional way of saying it.
And so you're getting rid of somebody that's not as profitable. You raise your prices, you pull in somebody who's more profitable, and now you notice an even bigger jump just from a smaller change in your price.
Totally agree with you. And I have to say, that's the hardest, I think as a business owner, that's the hardest decision to make too. It's like raising prices. But what if I lose business? Probably.
You will lose business.
Exactly. So, but I think at the end of the day, though, you may be attracting the ideal client for that new price, for that new level itself.
Right.
And sometimes a price increase, once again, if you know your numbers, a price increase doesn't have to necessarily be, I have to 100%. A few dollars more for a particular product itself could actually change your sales, to profit calculation itself. But again, it's you have to know your information, your books, to be able to make that conclusion.
Yeah, and I think, I've seen some businesses that advertise, hey, prices are going up. And I've seen other businesses that just do it.
Just do it.
And nobody really... One thing I was always worried about is, well, wait a minute, what if a client from 2019 refers me a client today in 2022 or next year in 2023?
Right.
And I'm worried that the old client's going to tell the new client what they paid me. But then you've always got the fallback to say, well, listen, that was... First of all, it's confidential, so I can't confirm it as an attorney.
Confirm or deny.
But at the same time, that was 2019. We're now in 2023.
Exactly.
Prices have gone up a little bit. I've gotten more knowledge about how to do your case effectively, or blah, 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 blah. And sometimes you don't even need to announce it. You just do it.
Just do it. And that's the... Again, as a small business owner, totally understand that's the fear. But I think for most of us itself, if we're confident in the product we're selling, the services we're providing, once again, you're right. Get your ideal client. These types of changes itself just attract the people you want to work with.
Yeah, there's a story that I've heard, and I can't remember, I may have said it on the show in previous episodes, but there's a story that there's a big company, and it's got this huge piece of machinery, and this particular piece of machinery is what makes the business go. Without this piece of machinery, the business basically doesn't function. And one day it breaks down. So they call the engineer in, they call the repairman in, and they say, hey, we need you to fix this machine. The guy walks up, looks at the machine for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, pulls out a small hammer, taps the machine. The machine whirls back to life, and production starts again. Great, thank you, everything's working, great, send us your bill. The guy sends the bill, and it's $10,000. And the company goes, oh my gosh, all you did was look at it for 60 seconds and tap it with a hammer. You need to break down why we're paying you the $10,000. And so he takes the invoice back, he revises the invoice, sends it back. The invoice says, review of the machine, hitting it with a hammer, $100. Knowing where to hit the hammer and how hard to hit the hammer, $9,900.
I love it.
It's the experience of, people say to me all the time, you know so much about this. How? Well, it's because I've made all the mistakes before. Right. And so part of what you're getting from me is, how not to make some of the previous mistakes that I've already made.
Yeah, and you're the professional. You have the expertise. You're bringing the knowledge, your experience to the table itself that you would not normally get if you just Google bankruptcy.
Well, what did Jason say 2 weeks ago? Your Google search is no substitute for my law degree.
Oh, that's 2 references to Jason. He put it in the pot here. He owes us some money here. Let's go.
He owes us another bottle of bourbon.
There you go.
Actually, he owes you a bottle.
Yeah, he owes me one, Jason. If you're listening, thank you. All right, let me throw you some honorable mentions. But it's so important though, setting aside for savings. Once again, just like any personal, we need an emergency fund. As much as we'd like to think that we're going to always sell in our business each month, it's going to be a great month. Having reserves allows us to be able to manage those down months. Once again, if you're seasonal, I'd imagine my folks who are like lawn maintenance in Florida, maybe not. There's probably downtime, but the guys who are in,
In Florida,
Northeast.
there's no downtime.
But back in New York and Northeast and stuff like that, I imagine they have to prepare, because as much as we'd like to be cutting grass, changing the business model, doing raking leaves, whatever, you have to make sure you have some reserves for the months that you're not doing so well. Not so well, excuse me. Well, I guess I would put it like, it's not just as much as we're killing it every month. It may not be the case. So having those reserves help you not have to have so much stress.
Yeah, knowing in your business what are the high times, what are the low times. Yeah, I agree. One of the other things that I put in my list was make sure you pay the people that you have to pay. So, I always make sure that the employees get paid. I always make sure the IRS gets paid. If I had to choose between do I pay my employees or do I pay this month's credit card bill, I'm going to pay the employees.
Of course.
Because without the employees, my 80-hour work week becomes a 180-hour work week. So one of the things I put in here is making sure you pay based on the priorities that need to be paid.
That's I would say another honorable mention then is know your priorities in regards to the business and the goals itself. So it's good to have goals. It's good to have, what we want to accomplish from a business standpoint, but write them down. Know what the priorities are, how you're going to use the cash flow, the money each month itself, so you know that, and stick to it. It's one of those kind of things that it's easy to say, oh, I'll always follow this, or I know what I'm doing in regards to what's in your head, but life happens. You start to realize that you get distracted with other things. Having this information in front of you just allows you to kind of make sure you're doing it.
Other things happen other than what goes on at work?
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Never that, buddy. I would say pay your employees, but small business owners, if you're entrepreneur, self-employed kind of thing, pay yourself.
Yeah, pay yourself.
Oh my
first.
goodness, pay yourself. Like, it's so important. Like, yes, remember, we go back to the business versus separating business and personal accounts. Have your business. You are a salaried employee in your business itself. Make sure that it's part of your budget, part of your spending plan in regards to having that. That doesn't mean that you go 100% of all income and revenue.
Talk to your CPA about that, because there are rules. When I started, so I am a W-2 employee of Yesner Law, but there are certain rules. I have to make sure that I'm paid a reasonable wage for what I do for the law firm. I need to make sure that the law firm is withholding. I do still need to take home profit from the law firm to compensate. So, talk to your CPA. Should you be a pure LLC? Should you be a corporation? Should you be an S corporation? Should you be, so talk to your CPA about some of those issues as well. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this law firm thing if it wasn't paying me too.
Well, to each their own in regards to that. But like I said, it's amazing to be a business owner itself. But if the business itself is just another job, you're really not. Again, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have the only boss I hate is me. But that sounds like I have other problems if I do that.
Yeah. One of the other honorable mentions that I thought of is, and you alluded to it earlier, have an exit plan. I don't really want to work as an attorney at Yesner Law until the day I drop dead. At some point,
that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, at some point, I want to sip on umbrella drinks. I don't
just not on the weekends.
Yeah, just not on the weekends and mornings and nights. I want to be able to sip on them during the day.
Keeping it real.
But yeah, what's your exit strategy? I mean, it's not too early to think about, even when you start the business, what's your exit strategy? Now, most of the time, the exit strategy is I'm going to sell the business.
Yes, that's ideal.
You want to make sure that are you putting the systems in place that you have something to sell. But yeah, what's your exit plan?
I like the idea. A lot of us think of that too. Is like, oh, it's just I have a business. I'm my own owner. This and this and that. But what happens if you stop working? Is there value in the business that you've put together and created, put all the sweat and tears for people who've done it for 20, 30, 40 years? Obviously, if there's legacy that you can pass down to family who can continue the business, that's great. But what if you stop working, does the business stop existing? And I think that's having a strategy to make sure that doesn't happen. Very important for our new business owners as well.
One of the things that really, really scared me, that was kind of a wake-up call for me, back in February of 21, so February of last year, my parents each individually went through some medical issues, and I basically had to take a week and go up to Tallahassee to take care of them for a week and work remotely.
Okay.
And when I got back, I kind of felt like the law firm had gone off the rails a little bit because I wasn't here physically, and it scared the bejesus out of me.
Right.
And so I immediately started putting processes and systems in place. Look, I mean, I love coming to work every day. I can work remotely, but I choose to be here in the office. But if something were to happen to me, what if I went through a health scare and I had to be in the hospital for a week or for 3 days or for 5 days or one of my family members or something like that?
Yeah.
Have I set up the business to be able to function without me? Not necessarily to sell it.
Yeah.
But have I set it up to function, to continue to generate revenue and do work on behalf of clients when I'm not here 100% of the time?
And that's important because, once again, I always say, if you're not here, is the business existing and stuff like that. And most of us don't put that plan in place. Hire the right people around you that can continue to drive, having good lawyers, partners, whoever it is, so that we can still have the revenue coming into the business itself. All of those things require good planning and obviously a little bit more aware of how we manage our business each day.
Exactly.
So it's all good. It's all good.
Anything else you got, or can we maybe start to wrap up this episode?
I would say it's time to wrap it up. I see the producer and it's just Shawn waving his finger.
I'm not waving. We're on video, right? The video will eventually come out and prove you wrong.
I did. If the glove doesn't fit, I'm just saying. So don't even go there. But
I don't do that kind of law.
We'll get them a guest here. No, dude. Just life happens. I would say I'm winning the lottery. So just, at this time, I think no one's won the lottery in regards to $800 million gazillion dollars that's out there. So I plan to win the lottery. So
Right.
I will. This is my last episode. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I will continue to do this, and we'll drink Mai Tais while we do it. So
Sounds good. I do want to talk about our second sponsor real quick. He's been with us since day one. Mark Purvis, he's our editor, but he also has a website called legacyspotlight.com. I've talked about it the last however many episodes. But if you have stories that you want to preserve for future generations, or if you want to preserve the stories of your parents and grandparents for future generations, go to legacyspotlight.com. Mark is a 20-year Emmy Award-winning videographer. He's done videos for me before. He'll come out, he'll make it fun, he'll do everything, and he'll help you preserve those stories for future generations. The other things I want to mention real quick, we've also got our Patreon page, so we really, really appreciate all of the support. And if all you do is listen to us every week, that is plenty enough for us. If you want to do more, we've got our Patreon page. So go search for Crushing Debt on Patreon, and there's different levels. You can support us, and that would help offset a lot of the costs that this show costs us to produce. So that's where it would go. And the more money that we are able to get from our listeners, the more we're going to be able to do for our listeners. So that's the whole purpose behind Patreon. I don't intend to retire as a lawyer and become a full-time podcaster.
Well, dare to dream, brother. Dare to dream.
I know. And then the last thing that I do have to mention, the Curbelo Financial TikTok channel.
I had to take a little hiatus itself, but I've actually convinced my wife that she should be the face because she has an amazing face.
It's a much prettier face. I will admit, it is a much, much prettier face.
Bite your tongue. What is wrong with you? All right. But yes, please, on the social medias, it's all tips and tricks, but also having fun. Making money can be very, very stressful, but let's learn how to use it so we're not so stressed on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So I think that'll do it for this week's episode. You want to do the line?
I forgot it because I was a week off, so I'll let you do it, brother, because it is your show. Let's do it. Come on.
When you want more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. That'll do it for this week's episode, and we'll talk to you on next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Shawn or connect with us on social media. Shawn Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.